The bright studio lights shined down as the cameras rolled, capturing every moment of the heated debate. A well-known liberal talk show host, famous for her sharp criticisms and strong opinions, sat confidently in her chair. With a smirk, she turned toward Joe Burrow, ready to tear him apart in front of millions of viewers. Her words were sharp, questioning his intelligence, leadership, and even his relevance in the NFL. The audience laughed, enjoying the spectacle. But Burrow did not flinch. Instead, he leaned back, his expression unreadable. Then, as the laughter faded, he spoke. His response changed everything. The camera zoomed in on Joe Burrow, capturing every detail of his calm demeanor. The studio, filled with a live audience, had an electric energy, one fueled by controversy and anticipation. The talk show host, known for aggressively challenging public figures, had set her sights on him. She leaned forward, her voice dripping with confidence, eager to break him down in front of millions. The crowd, mostly supporters of her views, was already nodding along, waiting for Burrow to stumble. The show had been marketed as a discussion about sports, but Burrow knew better. He had seen this before, athletes being used as political props, forced into conversations that had nothing to do with football. He had agreed to this interview knowing that he would be tested, but what he did not expect was the level of hostility waiting for him. The host wasted no time. "Joe, you have had your share of struggles this season. Some say your time as an elite quarterback is coming to an end. Would you agree that maybe, just maybe, you are not as good as people thought?" Her tone was sharp, designed to provoke. The audience chuckled, nodding in agreement. They had come for a show, and the host was delivering. Burrow, however, did not react. He simply adjusted his posture, his eyes locked on hers, waiting. She continued, her voice growing bolder. "You are often praised for your leadership, but I have to ask, what kind of leader stays silent when the world is demanding answers? Shouldn't someone with your platform be using it for more than just football?" The room tensed. This was no longer about the game. The host had shifted the conversation, dragging Burrow into deeper waters. The crowd erupted, cheering her on, sensing that she had put him in a difficult position. Burrow exhaled slowly, his face unreadable. He had heard these kinds of accusations before, people trying to define him, expecting him to fit into a mold they had created, but he was not here to play their game. Then, just as the noise started to settle, he finally spoke. His voice was steady, his words deliberate. "Are you asking because you want to understand, or because you want a headline?" The audience fell silent. The shift had begun. The host's confident smirk faltered for just a second. She had expected Joe Burrow to stumble, to fumble over his words like so many others had before him. But his response had caught her off guard. The silence in the room was deafening, the weight of his words hanging in the air. She quickly recovered, leaning forward with an exaggerated chuckle, shaking her head as if his response was nothing more than a clever deflection. "Oh, Joe," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "You are good, I will give you that. But let us be honest here. People do not watch you just to see you throw a football. You are a public figure, and with that comes responsibility. Do you think staying silent makes you a real leader?" The crowd erupted in applause, feeding off her energy. Some nodded, others clapped loudly, encouraged by the host's relentless attack. She sensed the momentum swinging back in her favor, and she pushed harder. "You have had your struggles this season. You are no Patrick Mahomes, no Tom Brady. Some say your best days are already behind you." Her words cut sharp, every syllable meant to provoke. "And let us not forget that despite all the hype, you still have not won a Super Bowl. Maybe, just maybe, you are not the golden boy people want you to be." Burrow remained still. His face betrayed nothing. Not anger, not frustration, not even amusement. He simply stared at her, waiting. The host was not done. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice as if she were about to share a deep, undeniable truth. Do you ever think that maybe, just maybe, you are overrated? The words lingered, heavy and deliberate. The crowd gasped, some even laughing. The attack had reached its peak. This was the moment where most people crumbled, where their frustration boiled over, and they lashed out. But Burrow? He exhaled, slow and controlled, then finally spoke. His voice was calm, steady, unwavering. "I do not need to convince you of who I am," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "I have already proved it where it matters." The room went silent again. This time, the host did not laugh. Something had changed. The host shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The energy in the room had changed. The crowd, which had been laughing moments ago, was now silent, waiting. Joe Burrow had not raised his voice, had not fired back with insults or frustration. He had done something far more powerful. He had refused to be shaken. She cleared her throat, trying to regain control. "Come on, Joe," she said, forcing a chuckle. "Are you really saying that nothing I just said bothers you? That you do not feel the pressure of people expecting more from you?" Burrow leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together, his eyes never leaving hers. "Pressure?" he repeated, his tone even. "You think this is pressure?" The host opened her mouth to respond, but Burrow continued. "Let me tell you about pressure. Pressure is walking into a locker room full of teammates who are counting on you, knowing that one mistake can cost them everything. Pressure is standing on a field in front of 70,000 people with seconds left on the clock and the entire game in your hands. Pressure is knowing that no matter how many hits you take, no matter how many times you get knocked down, you have to get back up because quitting is not an option." The host blinked, her confidence faltering. The audience was no longer laughing. They were listening. Burrow's voice remained steady, controlled. "You sit in this chair and talk about athletes like we are just stories to be picked apart, like our careers exist for entertainment. But let me ask you something. Have you ever put in the work? Have you ever woken up at 4 a.m. to train, pushed your body past its breaking point, or played through pain because you had no choice?" The host fumbled with her cue cards, clearly caught off guard. Burrow continued, his tone never wavering. "You want to talk about leadership? Leadership is not about who talks the loudest. It is about showing up, doing the work, and proving yourself every single day. I do not need to defend myself to you. My actions speak louder than your words ever could." The room was completely still. The host, usually quick with a response, had none. Burrow leaned back in his chair. "So tell me," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "Are we done here?" The silence was deafening. The host sat frozen, gripping the armrest of her chair as if she had just lost control of the very show she commanded. The air in the studio felt different now, heavier, charged with something no one had expected. The audience, which had been roaring with laughter minutes ago, sat in stunned silence. No one dared to interrupt. Burrow had not shouted. He had not fired back with insults. He had simply spoken the truth, and that truth had shattered the illusion the host had carefully built around this moment. She had expected him to fold under pressure, to lash out, to give her the viral moment she wanted. Instead, he had taken control without raising his voice. The host cleared her throat, forcing an awkward smile as she shuffled her cue cards. "Well, Joe," she said, her voice lacking the confidence it had before. "I have to admit, I did not expect you to respond that way." Burrow did not blink. "That is because you thought I was here to argue," he said calmly. "I am not. I am here because I know who I am. You do not have to believe in me. That does not change what I have done or what I will continue to do." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Some whispered among themselves. Even those who had cheered the host's attacks earlier were now reconsidering. The host glanced at the producer off camera, silently asking for help. But there was nothing anyone could do. The moment was slipping away from her. Burrow leaned forward, placing his hands on his knees. "You want to talk about what I have not done? Let us talk about what I have," he said. "I have led teams that no one believed in. I have stood on a field, injured and exhausted, and still delivered. I have played through pain most people could not imagine, and every single time I have been counted out, I have proven them wrong." The audience shifted again. A few clapped. The energy in the room had flipped. Burrow's eyes remained locked on the host. "So I will ask you again," he said, his voice steady. "Are we done here?" The host swallowed hard, but before she could respond, something even more unexpected happened. The audience erupted, this time not in laughter, but in applause. The applause grew louder, filling the studio with an energy that even the host could not control. It was not the forced, performative clapping that usually followed her takedowns. This was different. This was genuine. The crowd, even those who had laughed at Burrow before, had shifted. They had seen something rare, a man who refused to be shaken. The host, visibly uncomfortable, forced a tight smile. She had spent years dominating conversations, controlling the narrative, but now she had lost control of her own stage. She glanced at the cameras, at the producers, searching for a way out. Burrow, however, remained calm. He had said what needed to be said, and he was done. He leaned back, his posture relaxed, while the host sat stiffly, unsure of what to do next. She finally spoke, but her voice lacked the authority she once had. "Well, Joe, I think we have covered a lot today," she said, trying to wrap things up quickly. "I am sure our audience has a lot to think about." Burrow gave a slow nod, his eyes still locked on hers. "Yes," he said. "They do." The silence that followed was louder than any debate. The cameras captured it all, the moment when the host realized she had not humiliated Joe Burrow. Instead, she had given him a platform to prove exactly why he is different. Then, almost as if the audience had made their decision, they stood up, clapping, cheering, some even whistling. The host's show had never seen this before. Usually, she dictated the energy. Not today. Social media exploded within minutes. Clips of the exchange spread like wildfire. Fans, analysts, and even players weighed in. Some criticized the host for trying to bait Burrow into controversy. Others praised him for handling the moment with class, confidence, and complete control. By the time the interview ended, the damage was done. Not to Burrow, but to the host. She had set out to expose him, but instead, she had exposed herself. As Burrow walked off the stage, one thing was clear. He had not just won the moment. He had reminded the world exactly why he is built different. Joe Burrow did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. With nothing but his words and unshakable confidence, he turned a planned humiliation into his victory. The host had set a trap, but she fell into it instead. This was more than just an interview. It was a statement. Burrow proved that real leaders do not need to explain themselves. They prove who they are every single time they step up. What do you think? Did Joe Burrow handle this perfectly, or should he have gone even harder? Comment below, like, share, and subscribe for more powerful NFL stories.